Verse 20, and the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed, listen to what the problem is, transgressed my covenant that I commanded their fathers, and as have not obeyed my voice. He explains the covenant right there again in one sentence. They have broken my covenant by doing what? Not obeying my voice. What is the covenant? I agree to obey your voice. Covenant's not like 5,000 lines of small print and all this other stuff. Now, he does give us lots of lines of print to explain what it means and what it looks like to obey his voice, but the covenant is one line. We agree to do what he says. That's it. It's really not that complex. But we're stubborn. He says Yahweh's displeasure burned against them. Verse 21, and I shall no longer drive out from before them any of the nations which Yehoshua left when he died, in order to try Israel by them, to judge them, to whether they would guard the way of Yahweh, to walk in them as their fathers guarded them or not. Deuteronomy 8:2 is right there. He said, I'm going to use these things to test them, to try them, to see whether it's in their hearts to guard the commands or not. If you are my child and you're young enough, like my children are still in that age range where they're still young enough, I can make them do anything. And I can make them not do anything. But guess what? There's going to be an age where that's not the case anymore. So unless I've taught them to have a heart for what I'd like them to do and not do, what are the odds that they're going to actually do the things that I forced them to do once they're free to do it their way? Pretty slim. But I have to get them to have a heart for it. Because some of you parents have asked me about your older teenagers. Well, should I be making them come to services? I said, well, that's a tough question. We need to talk more specifically about your situation, but forcing them doesn't do any good. If they come here hating it and resenting it, they're going to be so quick to bolt as soon as they can. I'm not talking about your 12-year-old. I'm talking about your 18, 19-year-olds who may still be living in your house. Forcing them only builds up in them resentment, bitterness, anger. So now they come here with an attitude where they're not ready to receive anything. And so forcing them doesn't do any good. And I've had parents get mad at me when I've given counsel like that because they're like, but, what do you mean but? This is the truth and reality. Well, don't give me the but. Don't you remember being 18, 19, 20? What, do you think they're so different than you? Look, I tell the teenagers this, and you can ask them all the time. Our generation, okay, and I'm 55 years old. So I got a good 40 years difference between them at 15 and me at 55. But I can promise you, it's not that different. We're not in those kind of generations where the world is so different, where when our grandparents would say, well, when I was a kid. No, you know what? Except for some electronic differences, all right, we didn't have cell phones and tablets. Otherwise, life was pretty much the same. We did the same dumb things they're tempted to do that we hope they don't. We dealt with drugs. We dealt with sex. We dealt with violence. We dealt with all the worldly things. So don't forget that your children, what they're going through, you were that. And somehow you forget what it was like when you were 17, 18, and 19. Really? Like you were such an angel. You won't even tell your children the things you did when you were 17, 18, and 19, I promise you. Because you never told anybody except your friends who you did that stuff with. Your parents never knew, at least you hoped that they didn't, right? You thought that you fooled them. And yet you act like you don't know how quickly it was. As soon as you came out from under their authority, what did you do? You did whatever you wanted. I'm free. I'm my own man. I'm my own woman. I can do whatever I want. So when it says raise up the child, it's really trying to say and help them to have a heart for it, to understand it. This is why it's all about Deuteronomy 6 and the idea of the V'ahavta, which is, and to love him. That's why I talked about in chapter, earlier in the chapter when I was talking about the idea of loving him. We were reading how that was a part of it. As we were going through this, that it had to do with that this is an issue of love. But we forget that sometimes. When we're in Joshua 23, remember we read that? It says, and to love Yahweh. with all of our heart. Otherwise, we're not going to walk in the ways we're supposed to.